first webinar on the series What's Cooking Digital Agriculture. So I can't believe that we have done since COVID already 40 and we are at the 41st right now. This is a series which is organized by Agriculture and Food Global Practice in collaboration with the Digital Agriculture team and IFC in the bank. And we invite thought leaders, innovators, startups, public sector leaders, government leaders, private sector leaders, thinkers, and people who are developing innovations, tools, approaches, analytical tools there. And we have seen a great interest in the series. And thanks all of you for your patronage. We have about 4,000 people who are looking at this at different points of time. This webinar series is also available on our digital agriculture website, and the link is at the bottom of the announcement. Vivek, can you put the slides? Yeah, okay. So these are both available at the website and also at the Open Learning Campus website. And we have found that all the people who are not able to attend these are going to these sites and the OLC website. All the recordings of all the last 40 webinars are available. So if you want to really learn a lot about what's happening in digital agriculture, this is now a very important source, a global source for knowledge and learning. And I would encourage you to go there. So please don't worry. Today's webinar and recording and presentations will also be available on the same site. And we will put the links to that also in the chat later on. So Vivek, can we go back to what we are doing? So today's topic is very, very important for us. In the bank, whenever we work on a new agenda, we develop diagnostic and analytical tools in the country to establish what are the entry points in terms of policy, entry points in terms of investment, what is the state of the play on that. And we did the same thing with climate smart agriculture profiles, and we did the same thing with nutrition profiles. And so I think this is so important that we do something similar with digital agriculture, because that allows the teams to look at the entry points on how to invest and what to invest in, and what are the kind of things in the ecosystem which are happening, which could impact what we are doing. So without further ado, I think today's topic is very important. We have a very rich panel of participants, panelists who are there. I think we will kick off initially with Froke. Froke is our practice manager in the Europe and Central Asia, has worked in all the regions of the bank, and brings both management and operational perspective to this. And she will give us her perspective, and we value that very much, and she will kick us off. After that, we have Katrina Schroeder. Katrina led the last digital transformation flagship report. And she was also part of the team which designed the digital agriculture profiles. And then we have two very important colleagues who are our partners in that from CIAT, James Giles and Vetske. And James is working currently in the climate strategy unit in Vietnam. And he has done a lot of work in Vietnam on the digital approaches, data-led approaches there. You can see his detailed bio in the announcement. Then Vetske also works for Alliance of Diversity International and CIAT as a senior coordinator, and she focuses on digital agriculture as part of developing a number of digital agriculture profiles there. She's also affiliated both the CGIAR's big data platform, which is our collaborator, and the gender platform there. And she has worked with the big data platform there. And then we have two of our own colleagues, Vinay Vutukuru, who coordinates our program in Kenya. And since we are not discussing Kenya profile, so we thought the discussants will bring the perspective from countries which are not represented today. And then our own Tomas Rosada, who leads our work in many countries in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Guatemala, and has also leading number of operations with data and digital components. So he is going to look at the Argentina profile and then talk about that. So we have about 5 minutes for Froke to kick us off. And then we have Katrina talking for 15 minutes, James talking for 15 minutes, and then with K talking for 15 minutes, and then each of the discussants spends 5 minutes each. You have a lot of time. You can start asking your questions as soon as the presenters present, because we would like the presenters and the panelists to respond virtually through chat, but in the end, we will harvest the most important questions and go for a Q&A session with all the panelists in the end. And so we would request you to keep your mics muted and start participating virtually through the chat. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to Froke to kick us off. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Parmesh. And I think having this webinar virtually is kind of the answer to why we need digital. It's not just in agriculture, but overall. I mean, where would we be if we wouldn't have digital connectivity? Overcome, some of the bottlenecks, leapfrog in many ways, and use these technologies for resilience, for markets, and for development in the way that suits best for the specific countries. So the profiles really help us doing that. So I look forward to the discussions. Thanks a lot for organizing the event.
For kicking us off, and we look forward to your support as we expand this tool next year. We're going to do more of these, and there are more tools which we have been, other tools which are coming up. We have a tool which Gates and Boston Consulting Group are developing, and so we will make presentations of other tools also as we go forward. But these tools we have found are useful for, as you rightly said, the rapid diagnostic and the people to understand where we should. Otherwise, this topic is so huge, we will not know where to go there. So I think we look forward to working closely with you when we go forward. Thanks for your remarks. I would now turn over to Katrina, and Katrina would also talk a little bit about the flagship report also, because we have finished this report and was released last March on digital acceleration of agriculture transformation, and then she will talk about the profiles as well. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Parmesh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thanks. So to put my presentation in perspective, I would like to mention that DAP methodology was, and 5 pilot DAPs for Argentina, Grenada, Kenya, Turkey, and Vietnam were developed as part of the global study on digital agriculture that Parmesh mentioned, the study titled "What's Cooking? Digital Transformation of the Agri-Food System." Therefore, as part of this DAP background, I would like to mention a couple of words about the report, because as I present the report and then I also talk about DAP, you will see the synergies between the two, and you'll see how how the report influenced the design of the DAP. So as ongoing digital transformation revolution is reshaping the global agri-food system, as Frauke mentioned, it is important for us to understand what needs to be done to put these digital technologies for work for such transformation to have not only efficient but also equitable and environmentally sustainable outcomes. And our report aims to support this goal with its three main contributions. First, it offers an economic analysis framework to examine the pathways through which digital technologies alter the agri-food system and result in more efficient, equitable, and environmentally sustainable outcomes. This is our EEE framework, and throughout my presentation, you'll hear a lot of mentioning EEE framework. We also highlight the existing evidence on the impacts of digital technologies on the agri-food system. So this is, I call this pathways of change, understanding the pathways of change. Second contribution is the policy framework, policy response, and the report outlines the role of public policy and investments in maximizing the positive impacts of digital technologies in the agri-food system, but also minimizing the risks. And finally, the third contribution of the report is an assessment tool, which is the digital agriculture profile, that allows for a more systematic analysis of countries' constraints and capabilities in leveraging digital technologies in the agri-food system. So a couple words about the pathways of change. We all know that agri-food system is hugely complex and involves very many actors, 8 billion consumers, more than 600,000 farmers, and many other stakeholders in between. This leads to high transaction costs in the system, and as a result, this leads to inefficient allocation of resources and welfare losses. Digital technologies are transforming the agri-food system by overcoming these long-standing transaction costs and associated constraints with the transaction costs and information asymmetries. And this is done, and this happens because of the ability of digital technologies to collect, use, and analyze massive amounts of machine-readable data about practically every aspect of the agricultural value chain. And the second is the emergence of digital platforms that are disrupting the existing business models. And if we're looking at the different agricultural revolutions that happened over time, digital agricultural revolution is different in the sense that it does not originate on the farm and then moves along the value chain, but instead it emerges from different points of the value chain from the very start, transforming the agri-food system. So as a result, digital technologies can improve the efficiency, equity, and environmental sustainability outcomes in the agri-food system. Once again, the EEE framework. So the report looks, and these are the pathways through which we studied the impacts of digital technologies on the system. So from the standpoint of efficiency, on-farm digital technologies improve technical and allocative efficiency. They also may lower the barriers to the agricultural technology adoption through improved access to knowledge and through improved processing of information. Off-farm digital technologies improve farmers' access to input, output, and financial markets, strengthen quality control and traceability, improve design and delivery of policy as agricultural policies and such. As I mentioned, we also look at the evidence of the impacts of digital technologies on the agri-food system. So in terms of the off-farm impacts, the evidence shows that better access to upstream and downstream markets results in 3 types of observable outcomes that have to do with the decreased price spread for the farmers, improved incomes, and also better allocation of resources. In terms of equity, digital agriculture has the potential to improve 3 types of digital divides that exist in rural areas: economic, spatial, and social, hence contributing positively to the equity in the system. And the third E, the contributions of digital technologies to environmental sustainability, comes from 3 types of effects. So the direct effects that stem from the changes to production and distribution processes that come with digital technologies and have direct impact on the use of natural resources. Enabling effect are attributable to better monitoring of the different processes along the value chain. And finally, behavioral impacts or effects that result from the transformation of behavior and attitudes of both consumers and producers that also have an effect on the improvements in environmental sustainability in the agri-food systems. So those were the pathways of change, the Triple E framework. The next is to the policy response. And as I mentioned, the report offers a policy framework that outlines the role of public policy in accelerating digital transformation and make sure that the outcomes efficient, equitable, and environmentally sustainable. And here we look at the policies that enable digital transformation of the agri-food system, and also additional policies that ensure this equitable and environmentally sustainable outcomes. Very briefly here, because I'll talk about this a little bit more once I start talking about DAPs, we differentiate across Tier 1 enablers and Tier 2 enablers. So Tier 1 enablers are the foundational enablers, so basically enablers that without which it would not be possible to even start having digital transformation in the country. And these have to do with availability and accessibility of digital infrastructure in a country, availability of physical infrastructure such as road, access to electricity and such, and also governmental capacity to foster digital innovation. And this has to do with the data systems at the government level and such. Tier 2 enablers are policy enablers. These are no regrets policy actions that are key to maximizing the benefits of digital transformation. And these have to do with access to data, competition in digital markets, availability of digital payment systems, and so on. I'll talk a little bit more about these in the next slides. So this brings me to the assessment tool, Digital Agriculture Profile. The DAPs, as I mentioned, are grounded in the framework developed in the report, assessment framework, as well as policy framework. And the design of the DAPs stemmed from the understanding that to prioritize policy actions for accelerating digital transformation of the agri-food system depends on the specific characteristics of the country and the levels of its agricultural and digital development. And this allows for developing tailored policy responses to achieve the highest impact. So DAP is a tool that aims at a rapid assessment of the state of digital and agricultural development in the country, and identifying public policy entry points to maximize efficiency, equity, and environmental sustainability outcomes in the agri-food system. There were 5 DAPs, as I already mentioned, for Argentina, Grenada, Kenya, Turkey, and Vietnam that were developed during the pilot stage. DAPs are a joint work with CIAT, FAO, and CGR platform for big data in agriculture, whom I would like to sincerely thank for the great collaboration. One thing to mention before I move on to methodology of the DAPs is that DAPs were developed in parallel with our work on the report. And each process was influencing each other. So the report was influencing the design of the DAPs, and at the same time, the findings on the ground and the experiences from the development of DAPs influenced the report itself. As such, the methodology that you would find described in our report, which is actually, I should have mentioned earlier, in the report, the DAP methodology is presented in one of the annexes. So this methodology is slightly different from the pilot DAPs that were finalized, precisely because it already accounts for some of the lessons learned. And it is likely to be revised even further, and Parmesh already mentioned that there are other development tools being developed. So as we work more in the countries and we test the tool in other countries, we'll likely start improving it even further. So with that being said, let me touch upon the DAP methodology. There are 4 key steps for the development of DAP. The first step is assessment of digital development in a country. The second step is assessment of the state of EEE in the agri-food system, both key strengths but also weaknesses. And then the analysis of progress, policy and enabling environment, and then potential impact and replicability of selected digital technologies. And finally, a very important step is the policy framework development. So to mention on the first step, as I mentioned, we identified 2 types of enablers. So the foundational enablers, as I mentioned before, is a digital infrastructure, non-digital enablers, but also governmental capacity for digital innovation. And to support assessment of the tier 1 enablers in a country, as part of this first step of the DAP methodology, report offers also agriculture digitalization index that looks at the assessment of this first tier enablers. It is certainly not meant to be comprehensive, rather it serves as an entry point for identifying key foundational strengths and weaknesses to enable an environment for digital agriculture that stems from the digital development standpoint. And here we look at the availability of coverage, affordability of digital technologies, and then non-digital enablers. And for availability, we actually developed some interesting maps in the report for the coverage in the agricultural areas, not just coverage in the country, but in the agricultural areas. In terms of tier 2 enablers, so here the DAPs look into for example, access to data in agriculture, legal and regulatory framework conducive to digital innovation, availability and the state of competition in digital markets, digital payment systems, digital skills, digital entrepreneurial ecosystems, and then transformational research and development. So something I mentioned as part of the policy framework. So here you can see the synergy between the DAP and the report. And for most of the tier 2 enablers, statistics or indicators are not readily available usually, and certainly there are no existing indicators with a global comprehensive coverage that could consistently allow to evaluate the state of these enablers in different countries. So the assessment here needs to be qualitative and should focus both on the state of development of these enablers in a country, but also look into the policy and regulatory environment for the development. The next step, as I mentioned before, is the assessment of EEE in the agri-food system, so efficiency, equity, environmental sustainability. And this step aims at understanding the state of EEE in the sector and identifying key constraints in the sector. This is done across the entire agri-food system, but also across different hubs. So we identify 4 hubs. This is input, production, distribution, and consumption. And the assessment is done through the analyzing existing indicators and data, as well as the inputs from the stakeholder consultations. And the report offers a set of indicators that can be used for the assessment of EEE in the agricultural sector. Once again, they're not meant to be comprehensive, but at least they offer a starting point for the assessment. So the next step is the EEP analysis. And here, following the analysis of the state of agriculture, agri-food system in the country, a set of technologies is identified that can help address these existing constraints and challenges. And these technologies are identified using this EEP framework. It looks at the progress, policy and enabling environment, and then potential impact and replicability. So progress is a current degree of development, use, maturity, scaling, profitability of the technology. Policy and enabling environment, as you can see, is a degree to which policy and investments enable future development, adoption, and impact of the technology. And then potential impact and replicability is the assessment of transformational impact of the technology in terms of its potential replication and scaling up. These are estimated, this analysis is estimated based on the, once again, desk research, but also heavily identified based on the stakeholder consultations. And the final step, and a very important step, is the policy framework development. So to develop actionable and relevant policy framework for digital transformation in the agri-food sector, digital agriculture profiles need to be undertaken with, in a very close collaboration and consultation with relevant stakeholders involved in digital agriculture in the country, in agricultural development, in digital development. So some of the key steps include stakeholder mapping, identifying those different stakeholders. Second is consultation with individual experts, trying to understand the state of EEE, the state of digital development, how they interconnect. Then conducting workshops, interviews with key experts. And also conducting, during these workshops, conducting the PPP exercise, ranking different technologies, then validating the data, and finally dissemination and outreach. Witzke and James will be, who will speak after me, will be able to share the experiences in organizing such consultations, and just in general, the experience with policy framework development in Vietnam and Turkey. So with this, let me thank you very much, and looking forward to the next presentations. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Katrina, for kicking us off so well and giving us the perspective of the foundational thinking which informs the digital agriculture profiles, because the flagship report lays down a framework on how we are looking at digital agriculture, because it's an area which is not just agriculture, it's technology, it's the infrastructure in digital and all. So we tried to bring all that together. It's been done jointly with our digital development team, which has contributed ideas to the digital side of it, the data, and then the data side, and now the agriculture, the application in agriculture. So, and I think this gives us a good segue to where we go next. And Witzke, over to you now for presenting how this was done in Vietnam. And we are very eagerly, as you see, a lot of questions are coming about Turkey. And so please, over to you now, next 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if it works. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity for me speaking here. So I've already been introduced a little bit. I have been working on this with Katerina closely on the Alliance side. And I will be presenting today the Digital Agriculture Country Profile for Turkey. And I'll start with a little bit of a background on agriculture in Turkey. So there are three distinct climatic zones. In the south, there's the Mediterranean climate, in the north, Black Sea, and in the middle, there's the continental climate. And these different climatic regions, plus the presence of fertile lands and different altitudes, make sure that there's a diverse agricultural sector in Turkey. Around 50% of the country is agricultural land, and the average farm sizes are around 6 hectares. There are many big farms in Turkey, but nearly 70% of the farmers hold less than 5 hectares of land. Turkey is a major producer of wheat, but also sugar beets, cotton, tomatoes, many fruits and vegetables, and it is the world's top producer for apricots and hazelnuts. Turkey is home to almost 81 million people. 25% of these live in rural areas. And also this leads to high employment in the agricultural sector, which is 20% of the population. There's currently a trend of people migrating to the cities, as it is in many countries. In Turkey, this is more men migrating to cities than women. And therefore, you can also see that there are more women employed in agriculture versus men. That's 33% versus 16% men employed. However, when you look at paid labor, 80% of the women and 25% of the male farmers conduct unpaid labor. So there's definitely a big gender gap when it comes to paid labor on the farm. And then the economic relevance of Turkey. So Turkey is one of the largest agriculture producers in the world. It accounts for about 6.4% of the GDP, valued at $761 billion US. There's also a big food processing industry, almost 50K food processing enterprises in the country. And it's also one of the largest agricultural exporters in the region. However, there's also certain challenges that the agricultural sector faces. One of them is low levels of productivity. There is a yield gap for many crops. For example, there is a 2018 paper by Atar. They calculated that for wheat, the actual production is only 39% of the potential production. So this is a gap of 33 million tons per year. So there's still a lot to be gained in levels of productivity. There's also problems with groundwater resources in Central Anatolia up to the point of environmental issues. There's a lot of work already being done by several companies, the government, about this. But there's still, this is still a major problem. And to make things worse, of course, climate change impacts are going to exacerbate all of these issues. Furthermore, there are inefficiencies in the value chains. For example, there's fragmented land size, small scale of production, the lack of product standardization, and the complete non-existence of demand-supply forecasting systems. So again, these are some challenges that should be addressed. There are also regional distributors that buy from producers and sell to national and international markets. In Turkey, they're very powerful, and this leads to farmers not always getting fair prices, and this slows down the income growth for farmers. And then there's also some policy-related constraints. There's a nice overview in the OECD Agricultural Policy Monitoring Evaluation 2020, if you're interested. So these are the key challenges in the agricultural sector in Turkey. And what we're going to be talking about in the next part of my presentation is the digital solutions for these challenges. So I'll start by going a deep dive into the infrastructure in Turkey, the digital infrastructure, after which I'll be discussing the results based on the methodology that Katerina just presented. So in terms of infrastructure, Turkey has been successful in improving access to digital technologies and services. They are currently ranked by GSMA, 5th out of 150 countries for improvements made to coverage, network performance, and availability. Most of these improvements are towards the physical infrastructure, and this includes cloud-based and big data services. And this has resulted in an increase for both the supply and demand side of digital products. And you can also see that back in the numbers of the ICT providers. through different technologies that are available. And then we analyze these on the degree of these triple P and triple E framework. And there's a big table in the DAPs that can be found. I already saw that there was a link to the digital agriculture country profiles, so you can take a look for yourself. There are challenges and technologies to address this for the different hubs. So that's the input hub, the producers at the level of the consumers, and the distribution as well. From this analysis, we chose 6 solutions to be prioritized. The first 2 are data-based technologies and advanced analytics for performance-based subsidy schemes in the input hub, as well as risk assessment models and digitalized contracts for optimal financial systems. And then on the production side, we prioritized the solution of sensors, Internet of Things, and advanced analytics for some decision support. This, of course, is for farmers with the means to invest in this. But also digital machinery sharing platform for lower cost of mechanization. And then there are different solutions as well across the food system. Very important smartphone applications, SMS or IVR systems for real-time information. This is across the system, so this is for the
James, and please stick to your time because we want a chance to take the questions at the end. Go ahead, James.
Let me just set my computer up. Great. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today and have this opportunity to share the outputs from the digital agriculture profile for Vietnam. I've already been introduced, but my name is James Giles, and I'm a specialist in climate strategy with the Alliance of Biodiversity International and SEAT, and I'm located in our Asia Regional Hub, which is in Hanoi, Vietnam. I work under the Climate Action Team, where I coordinate the Asia Climate Policy Hub. And over the last 4 years, most of my research has focused on the Climate Smart Agriculture Profiling Initiative that we've been running and working alongside the World Bank with as well. And it's through this work on Climate Smart Agriculture Profiling that I've observed the growing importance and potential for digital tools in order to support the agriculture sector through increased connectivity, better access to information and training. And that's really how I've pivoted into this work on digital agriculture. So I'll follow a similar format to Vitske, starting with a bit of agricultural context, national context for Vietnam. So Vietnam is home to 95.5 million people, of which 65% live in rural areas. Following a series of market-orientated policy reforms known as the Doi Moi, Vietnam has successfully transitioned into a lower middle income country, and as such has emerged as one of the top economies in Southeast Asia with GDP per capita of just under $2,000. However, agriculture still plays a vital role in Vietnam's economy, accounting for 17% of the national GDP and employing 40% of the workforce. Agriculture is still dominated by smallholder farmers, currently producing 71% of the food consumed in Vietnam, with rice production, with rice production accounting for 7.8 million hectares, which is equivalent to 77% of the total agricultural area. Both domestic food production and the food product export-import ratio have been on the rise since the early 2000s, resulting in improved food security in the country. And the sector now generates approximately $12.5 billion a year in exports, accounting for roughly 15% of total exports. And this makes Vietnam one of the world's largest exporters in rice and coffee, and a regional leader in other staple commodities, including cashew nuts, vegetables, and rubber. There are a number of challenges facing the agriculture sector in Vietnam. Vietnam is one of the countries that is worst affected by climate change, with increasingly unpredictable and extreme climatic conditions impacting agricultural production. Agriculture in Vietnam is also facing a growing domestic competition from successful urban sectors, including industry and services, creating pressure for resources such as land, labor, and water. And rising labor costs and a shrinking and aging agricultural population are also beginning to inhibit the agriculture sector's ability to compete on a global stage as a low-cost producer. In addition to this, agricultural value chains are fragmented, and this increases the transaction costs as middlemen exploit the information asymmetries that exist. This also results in a lack of information and knowledge flowing across value chains, which consequently drives inefficient and unsustainable farming practices through a lack of actionable decision support tools. In terms of digital infrastructure, Vietnam is quite well placed. over 99% of the households in Vietnam have access to electricity. Vietnam ranks 3rd in the world in terms of affordability of information and communication, and this is mostly driven through the availability of low-cost mobile data packages. 90% of farmers are in mobile phones, and per capita mobile subscription rates are well above 100%. And of those, 42% of the phone users have 3G or 4G connections, which is up 36% since 2015. As a result of this, Vietnam ranked 79 out of 139 countries included in the Network Readiness Index, which measures the enabling environment for technology use and development, including ICT infrastructure, affordability and skills, technology adoption, and the socioeconomic impact. And this places Vietnam ahead of Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar, which are its neighboring countries. Vietnam did, however, rank a little bit lower in terms of infrastructure, its economic impact, business innovation, and individual usage. And the International Telecoms Union ranked Vietnam 88 in the world and 17 in Asia for its e-government development index, which measures online government services and the extent of telecommunication connectivity and infrastructure and levels of human capacity for using these technologies. And the country scores, which leaves the country scoring above both the global and regional averages. And in terms of e-participation, Vietnam scores 72nd in the world and 19th in Asia. Vietnam does lag in terms of access, the use of fixed line broadband or telephones. However, this is likely as a result of what I mentioned earlier regarding the low-cost mobile network, mobile packages that you can purchase. So in terms of the technology solutions that were identified for Vietnam, this is following the same framework that has been presented in the 2 previous presentations. And here we identified 8 technologies that were considered to have a lot of potential for the agriculture sector here in Vietnam. And in terms of inputs, this is the use of unmanned aerial vehicles to provide additional data layers and high-resolution imagery to improve landscape monitoring. So this would enable them to have better information on the agricultural landscape, and also cloud-based solutions, which improves the access and sharing of information and makes more information available for supporting decision-making. And cloud-based solutions also has an impact on the production and distribution hub. Other production hub technologies that were viewed as being promising was the Internet of Things, which is a network of connected devices that help to monitor and collect information on the farm's conditions, but can also automate responses, which reduces the need for manual labor and also improves efficiency in input use. And then finally, we have the cellular network, and this is used to provide regular sort of SMS and IVR messaging for those farmers who maybe still use a feature phone or have a smartphone and aren't particularly technology savvy. There's a lot of promise in using these basic features in order to provide two-way communication between different actors in the value chain. And then finally, we look at these cross-cutting solutions for the food system. So these have an impact across all of the levels. And here we look at digital diaries so these are used to collect information at the farm level and log activities. But this information not only benefits the farmer by allowing that data to be analyzed and be used to help optimize their practices, but can also then be used by latter stages in the value chain in order to provide a level of traceability for those products. QR codes act as help manage the tracking of goods throughout the value chain. They very quickly identify and allow you to access information on those. So they show a lot of promise, particularly amongst end consumers who are used to this technology, so can then scan products and get information on it. Online marketplaces are currently not that well developed within the agriculture sector in Vietnam, and these have a number of potential benefits in terms of increasing the access to improved inputs, also access information or market information, price information, allow farmers to have larger markets to sell their produce, and generally overcome a lot of the market failures that do exist within the current system. And then finally, this is more sort of looking forward to the future. You have blockchain that allows for e-contracts and e-finance, and has been seen to have potential for tracking goods across the agricultural value chains. So what I did next is I wanted to have a look at the measures that had already been identified by the Vietnamese government in order to respond. So in order to do this, we mapped the existing policy framework, and we've identified some of the major policies, and then whether they cover some of these key issues related to digital adoption. And this is e-governance, data sharing and open data, supporting research activities, supporting technology development, supporting private sector investment, business model development to support more productive business models that can help scale out digital technologies, the development of e-commerce, and financing support for digital technologies. So here, if we look at a few of these policies, the Socio-Economic Development Plan of Vietnam to 2020 from this year, it's already identified the need to attract non-state resources, forming public-private partnerships to promote industrialization, modernization, and restructuring of the agricultural sector to achieve fourth industrial revolution, and also to develop experimental policies and business models to help technology adoption and uptake. The industrial development strategy specifically prioritized advanced technologies for the agriculture sector, and the incentive policies for enterprises investing in agricultural and rural development. This is a specific policy, has provisions with it that would extend greater financial support for technology development and technology transfer within the agriculture sector. There is the policy on e-governance, which covers a number of issues, but looks at sort of redesigning the operational improve data analytics. And there's also, the government is also guilty of not sharing data internally, despite it being emphasized within the policy framework. And that creates problems in terms of big data analytics for the agriculture sector. There is another issue is financial support and business environment, and there needs to be greater access for developers and users of financial services to help them invest in new technologies. Much of the development that's taking place at the moment is either through government institutions or public-run research organizations who are unlikely to get commercialization, or led by large corporations who sometimes don't focus on the smallholder farmers and only those in their existing value chains. So there needs to be more work on a supporting business environment. And then finally, trust and social norms are a barrier, and digital tools in Vietnam are still in their infancy. And while some larger value chain actors are embracing them, small-scale producers and smaller value chain actors remain hesitant to adopt them, and traditional sources of information and trading partners tend to be preferred. So on to my final slide, which is just some recommendations based on these identified gaps and challenges. So this is the need to build local capacity. So this would involve introducing digital literacy training into technology piloting into the extension curriculum, facilitating multi-directional information flows between extension providers and end users, and forging partnerships with mobile phone providers for e-extension and e-advisory. Secondly would be targeted financing. So this would be greater public financing support of enabling conditions to effectively stimulate digital innovations through agricultural value chains, rather than just among large-scale stakeholders. And here they should focus on smaller tech providers offering comprehensive solutions, and this can be done through forming public-private partnerships. And then finally, in terms of policy support, the existing IP laws need to be updated, because this is currently a major constraining factor in the development of new businesses and commercializing existing technologies. The laws on transboundary cloud services have been identified as quite restrictive. And then finally, the laws on drone use remain very restrictive, as it's currently not legal to fly a drone in Vietnam without authorization. So I think if you look at these recommendations, they fall mostly under the tier 2 enablers and adoption support policy interventions discussed by Katrina in the initial presentation. So that is my presentation on the current status of digital technologies in Vietnam.
Thanks, James, for giving us a very good perspective on what's happening in Vietnam. And I would, because we are now running behind time, so I would urge our discussants to be very specific to the tool and what's happening in their countries and what do they see as a relevance. And if they have any suggestions on how to improve it, that will be required. Can you remove the slide, please, if possible, James? Yeah. Stop sharing the content.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now over to Vinay, who leads our program in Kenya. One of the profiles was done in Kenya, and Kenya is one of our very active countries. In fact, we started investing in digital agriculture without looking at the profile. So I think now with hindsight, when you are looking at the profile, what do you see about this tool? And you think there are other things we need to include based on our current experience? Go ahead, Vinay.
Thank you, Parmesh, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this extremely useful discussion. So I'll very quickly, I think, focus on what are the aspects of these digital agriculture profile, which are very, very helpful and useful for a TTL like me, who's actually working with the government in really scaling up digital solutions and how we can use that. I think the first and foremost thing, and this is also a suggestion, is what we've found in Kenya, the best way to actually to scale up these technologies is to integrate with existing bank projects or organically link these solutions with the new pipeline operations that we are preparing. So I think that is something which really gives us a lot of leverage, because it enables us to really complement a lot of analog solutions to the digital solutions being provided. So that's my first kind of most important thing, that what we can get of it is to, I think as a TTL, think about how we can use some of these recommendations and the practical solutions and integrate with ongoing bank operations. The second most important aspect is, I think as we kind of work with the government, the DAP can be a great input for the Ministry of Agriculture as they develop their, I would say, roadmap or vision document. And that's perhaps one of the kind of outputs as TTLs and as bank teams we can aspire to, that how can we take these DAP, then actually provide technical assistance to the Ministry of Agriculture to kind of develop their roadmaps over a kind of 3-4 year period. And that roadmap can include two aspects. One, we've seen in Kenya that the government really looks at using data and digital technology from two angles. One, they really want to look at how they can use data to have very informed and evidence-based policy making, to really target their input subsidies, to be better prepared for floods, drought, or say kind of pest episodes like the locust one. So on the policy side, on the macro side, how can you use data for that? And of course, on the service delivery side, and I think this holds good for most of African countries, that with really shrinking fiscal space, the budgets for extension are getting reduced. So governments are really looking at how can we leverage digital technologies to transform the last mile service delivery, whether it's in delivery of inputs, delivery of extension, delivery of credit, or market linkages. So my second kind of big takeaway is, how can we use this DAP to help government have this vision document which looks at the policy side and the service delivery side. And the third big takeaway for me is, one of the big learnings for us, over the last 2 years is ecosystem building is very, very critical. I think as the bank, we really need to reach out to the private sector, to the civil society, and to a host of players who actually already worked on it. And so when I read the DAP profile for Kenya, I could see how Mercy Corps, the MasterCard Foundation, TechnoServe, DG Farm, all of these actors are mentioned. So I think that's the third big takeaway for us. How can we use and understand what's the ecosystem like, and how can we promote public-private partnerships? How can we help and facilitate partnerships with these important stakeholders on the private sector side with the public sector? And the last and the most important takeaway for me is selectivity. I think very often when we introduce these digital solutions to the county governments, I mean the subnational governments and the national governments, there's a lot of excitement about trying out everything. Selectivity is very important. And what I really like about this digital act profiles is how very, very rigorously each of the country profiles point out which are the most kind of important and which are the tech solutions which are working the most. I think that prioritization selectivity is very, very helpful. So I'll stop here and I'll just summarize the 4 aspects I said. One, how do we integrate this into the bank projects, both ongoing and pipeline? 2, how do we use this DAP to help government actually prepare a roadmap for themselves, both on the policy side and the service delivery side? 3, how can we really use this DAP to build the ecosystem and promote public-private partnerships? And last, how can we use this to ensure selectivity and prioritization? I'll stop here, Parmesh.
Thank you very much, Vinay, for giving a perspective of how this really works at the country level and what could be the potential to use it and what additionally we need to do that. Well, now I want to go to Tomas at the end, who's leading number of our operations in Mexico. He's designing number of new operations in Argentina as well. He's seen the profile of Argentina, Tomas, from your vantage point, what do you see that what out of this you find useful and what additionally you think we should do?
Thank you very much, Parmesh and colleagues, for inviting me to this detail. First takeaway for me is that we need more DAPs in more countries. As you said,
Tomas, sorry to interrupt you. Can you be slightly louder because the voice is coming very muted?
Oh, can you hear me better now?
Better now. Go.
Okay. So my first takeaway is that we need more digital agriculture profiles. That's my first lesson. I think we need to create a critical mass of diagnostics to have a cross comparison. When I was hearing the Turkey experience, I was thinking of Argentina as well, but connecting with Mexico, which we don't have in Mexico, for instance. So I think it would be good to have more of these DAPs to identify trends and opportunities. The second thing I would like to say, Parmesh, is that I think these DAPs help us TTLs on the ground to identify entry points, to identify topics, to identify institutions, but ultimately to identify champions of this agenda. And I will give an example, two examples. One in Argentina, as you rightly pointed out in the DAP of Argentina, INTA is one of the public institutions that was quoted in the DAP, the National Institute of Agricultural Transformation, which is a public entity. But so that is one type of champion that we can find, but also I was thinking of Mexico and the Mexican experience that we're having just right now with a second tier development bank that is very much into this agenda of agri-tech systems and investments. So these DAPs can help us identify a champion with whom which we can converse and then develop a very operational agenda. In terms of Argentina, I would just like to highlight two very clear entry points to connect this DAP with what we already have on the ground and on the pipeline. One is an operation that we have on integrated risk management for the agro-industrial system in Argentina, which is basically looking at three things. It's looking at information systems, how do we generate information and how we manage that information and make it accessible for decision making. Another angle is how do we make investments on the farm, on the ground for adaptation. And the third one is how do we pilot risk transfer instruments. And obviously, the piloting of risk transfer instruments is basically based on information. I mean, if we want to develop like parametric insurance or derivatives or any kind of those instruments, we absolutely need to have a solid information base and good platform that private and public agents can make use of and then develop the solutions. And the second operation that we have in the pipeline right now is the Climate Intelligent and Inclusive Agri-Food Systems project, which has basically last mile connectivity investments where the government of Argentina is pushing for bringing access, even though Argentina ranks well in terms of access and literacy and so on and so forth, but there are still pockets where investments need to be made in terms of public and private services. So that last mile connectivity. But the second area that I would like to highlight in this new operation is this interest of the government in revamping and modernizing INTA and making things like innovation challenge funds and strengthening the agtech ecosystem in Argentina. So there's a clear signal from the public sector to think along the terms of the DAP, but with this, not just the public angle, but also how do we bring the private sector into the table for this kind of solutions. And then that brings me to my last set of comments, which is what do I see in terms of Argentina, for example? In Argentina, if you read at the DAP, you see that there are startups. There is good literacy rates of the population. You have a good market size, both domestic and international, because Argentina is a large powerhouse in agriculture. So your question is, what is missing in Argentina to completely unleash the potential of digital agriculture? And I would like to risk an answer to that, and that is, I think the missing link here is the financial sector. We need to think and work more closely with the Argentinian financial sector to develop more financial tools and instruments that can really help us create market-based solutions for this digital agriculture agenda. Because right now we have somewhat of a disconnect. We have public investments on the one hand, and then you have the large, big commercial integrated private solutions on the other hand. But there is somewhere in between that needs to be worked out, and I think the financial sector has a big role to play. Of course, there are reasons why it's not happening. I mean, we cannot ignore the macroeconomic context of the country, which obviously limits and constrains what the financial sector can do and will do in the foreseeable future. But that is something to bear in mind. And the second thing that I would highlight is we need to use these DAP type knowledge products to trigger more demonstration effect to middle-sized and small-sized producers. We heard a conversation in Mexico, but we also heard it in Brazil and Argentina, for example. I mean, how can you convince smallholders or medium-sized producers to invest in something that where they're basically taking a bet and taking a risk and taking a chance? I mean, and one thing is to invest with grant money, but another thing is to invest with a loan, where if you don't succeed, then you have two problems, right? You didn't succeed, and then you have to repay those resources that you use for that experiment. So we need to create more of that information, demonstration effect to boost adoption and scale up in this kind of solutions. And I think on that note, I will stop, but I would like to thank you once again for inviting me to this conversation.
Thank you very much, Tomas and Vinay both. I think this is a very rich perspective, and I think this makes things live. And we take this whole idea then to two TTLs who are leading new operations, who are our leaders in this area. I think this gives us a lot of hope that there will be an uptake for these tools. And I think what you are right is about that. I think the fintech part, in the financial digital finance part, is the one which will carry agri-tech also. This is our deep dive, which we did with IFC, also came out with the same finding. And so generally, I think the digital finance part in our agriculture, digital work is less. And I think increasingly we are seeing requests coming in from other countries to include that, because we work with AgriWallet and lots of other very innovative financial companies as we go forward. So I think your point about building finance into it, looking at the risk management tools, doing a little bit more analytics on how this is going to be paid back, what is going to be relevant for smaller, all these are very good points which you have made. And we hope that we are able to work closely with you when you lead the new operations in Argentina and see how we can really bring this to the fore, because there could be a version 2 of this profile, which we could do, which is more specific to what you are talking about. And this is a generic issue we will talk about. So what I will do now, I think there's a rich discussion going on, virtual discussion. I really appreciate Katrina, Veske, and everyone else really engaging with the participants. Very good set of questions. So what I will do is, since we have very less time, I'll pick 3 or 4 clustered ideas out of this, and I'll give 2 minutes each to each of the panelists to respond, and we'll close after that. The first issue which is coming about is this differentiation issue, which is the equity issue, which Katrina is a big pillar of what you are doing that. So it is smallholders, large holders. Digital, how does it work for smallholders? How are we really advising the governments to do that? The second part is rural, urban. A lot of connectivity data is not differentiated. And so we get very excited by seeing 98% mobile coverage, but that doesn't mean a thing. So it's like the digital literacy, it's the access in rural areas as opposed to urban areas. Are there data which we should harvest? And should we work with GSMA to develop a rural module in this? Because we are talking with GSMA. We could really develop a database with them so that it gives you more differentiated data there. But I think Katrina has looked at this and thought about this quite a bit when she has done it. So please respond to rural data segmentation for smallholders. So this equity issue, and then the issue was about this, centralized versus democratization, and a lot of issues came in there. So there is a school of thought which says that if we work with, then everything is going to go to Amazon and everyone. and then there's no democratization of data, and all the new startups which are coming and all will not come. The innovation ecosystem will not develop. So it's a philosophical question, but not philosophical. It's a real question, number one. The second point, I think we're talking about the public and private sector. I think a lot of people are raising this issue. Should public good be spending time on what private sector be doing? What should be the role of public good versus private good? How can we use the digital agriculture profile to come out with that recommendation? What should be the public good and what should be the enablers or the ecosystem things which the government should be doing to remove constraints? It's the second big issue. There's also the issue of what has been the uptake in Turkey and Vietnam, because we didn't talk about that. We just talked about the tool, and we didn't talk about what happened as a result of that. What happened in Turkey and Vietnam as a result of that. So I think people are asking what happened to it after the profile was done, because you had a stakeholder engagement and everything. Did anything happen after that, or it is left to a particular TTL to take it or leave it? Or is there something which should be done after the digital agriculture profile to ensure that it doesn't end as a report, but goes into a more institutionalization process? How should we do these in future to do that? That's a third set of questions. And then I think there's also the question that are we coming with too generic recommendations where we can pick Vietnam, Mexico, anywhere, the recommendations are absolutely the same, or we are coming with context specific. How do we really, what is context specific and what is general out of this? Because if you come with vanilla recommendations, this tool will lose its relevance. So that's another question there. The final question, I think, is about the unit of analysis, basically, and what other tools we should integrate, EBA and others. And Farbod is online, so he has responded to that very good. I'm glad that Farbod is there and listening to all this, because I think we have to also not go to the client with hundreds of tools. We have to integrate the tools as we go forward, so that when we are going now, we should have some integration there. And the final issue is that one of the key points in this is the stakeholder analysis, and which is done. Because what Thomas says, can we identify the key institutions with which we will work, so that you have a stakeholder analysis also done as a part of it. So that's the final point. So I will ask you not to respond to all the questions. The only constraint is that you have 2 minutes each. So I will now start with Katrina and then go in that order to Wiske and James. Katrina,
thank you very much. Indeed, very lively discussions. Exciting to see these interesting questions. Certainly, I cannot address all the points you raised. So why don't I touch upon equity and then the data available, rural divide, and the data available to measure that rural divide. So as I mentioned in my presentation, that digital technologies have this potential to alleviate economic, spatial, and social divide in rural areas. At the same time, and this is something I did not touch upon in the presentation because of time, is that digital transformation comes with many different risks of the increased digital divide. And this comes from the access to and use of digital technologies, job losses, concentration of knowledge and power and revenue in the markets in the hands of few. So this question between centralization and decentralization. So this would be a clear example of the need to address this risk, would be a clear example of where the government might need to step in, because maximizing the equity impacts might not be fully internalized by the private actors. So in this is the place where the government might come in and correct some of the existing market failures or create some public goods that would allow to improve equity in rural space. And we highlight some of the instruments or some of the policy solutions, investing in digital skills, developing customized tools, in some instances, reducing cost of digital technologies through the targeted subsidies where relevant. So things like that. But it is a very important issue, and I'm glad that it is raised. In terms of the data, in terms of the indicators, so indeed it is very difficult to find indicators of rural space. We address this through the availability sub-index in our index in the report. There we looked actually at the coverage in agriculture producing areas. So where if you look at the 2G, 3G, 4G coverage, that comes for the agriculture producing areas. In terms of affordability, it was very difficult to find consistent data across many countries to measure the actual situation in the rural space. And certainly here, if there can be something done with GSMA to do so, it would be very useful because we couldn't find anything. With this, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Katrina. Much appreciated. I think it's a wide variety of things. For everyone else, we are curating the chat. And we will send that to the panelists so that they can respond, and then the curated chat will be part of our recording of this, because the discussion is so rich outside that if it is not doesn't become part of proceedings, then it's unfair to do that. Now, over to you, Viske. Now, please go ahead, your response, and pick up 2 or 3 questions which you would like to respond so that we can finish in time. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree with Katerina more what she was saying. I do want to. I'm just going to put it here in the chat. Show you this paper. This is something that we've recently been working on. This is work from Sia. He has actually been able to distinguish between farmers and non-farmers in a lot of countries in the world. It's not covered everywhere, but this is an interesting paper to look at, because a lot of this data that you mentioned might be in there. It doesn't look at affordability, but I think this might be a nice start. One of the main problems with this is that a lot of this data is with the telecoms companies. And asking them to share this usually costs a lot of money. Like just to buy a data set, if you get $5,000 to pay for a data set, you're already lucky. So if you would want to do this for all the countries in the world, this is going to be a very expensive project just to get the data. So I think that's one of the problems that I see as well, that a lot of this is locked in the private sector, in the hands of the private sector. Yeah, and also there were a couple of questions about what private sector and what the public sector should do. And yeah, I think private sector is very, very important. However, the private sector usually needs to make money in their companies. That's their business model. And if you have farmers that are earning very little money, if you ask them to spend even just a little bit into acquiring information, for example, this is something that a lot of what I've seen a lot of times is really hard to monetize a business. So I think in that sense, public sector is going to be very, very important, because otherwise I think the digital divide is just going to get bigger. And with that note, I would like to give the last of the time to James. But first, I would like to thank you again for having me here in this webinar.
Thanks. Let's go over to you, James, for your remarks.
Great. It seems the question I intended to respond to is the one left. So there was one point made in the chat about sort of the generic responses, and I think the comment was directly sort of targeted towards Vietnam as well. And I do agree. There is a risk with this type of profiling work, especially when you're looking at sort of categories or types of technology, that you do start to see repetition across the different profiles, and also you might see the same with many of the challenges that are reducing the adoption of these technologies. And one of the ways that I think we've tackled that here in Vietnam is that following the project on the digital ag profile, we did have a follow-up project focusing on a specific value chain. And here, rather than, we actually also looked at the types of technology providers as well, rather than just the technology itself. And this revealed quite a lot in terms of, getting a deeper look at, which types of technologies were being used, what were the specific obstacles to individual technologies, or why were some business models of some providers performing better. So that is a way that you could potentially tackle this issue. And maybe, I don't know, if this were to be repeated as an exercise, scope to have sort of a case study on a specific commodity value chain that takes a bit of a deep dive could be helpful. And I think that also shows how these tools, the digital ag profiles, have been used, because they've created an awareness around the potential for these digital technologies, and certainly here in Vietnam have stimulated a lot of interest in doing additional research into the uptake of digital technology. So I think that's been a really positive outcome from this initiative. And then obviously I do also feel that the way that Katrina has taken all of these different pieces of data from the individual countries and brought them together to sort of inform the synthesis report is extremely useful exercise. And if this were to be replicated in other countries, having more data to input into these types of synthesis, I think would be highly valuable. So that's my response in terms of sort of the technologies being a little bit generic. But I think I'll leave it there, and I would also like to thank everyone for having me join this workshop. It's been highly informative.
Many thanks, James. I think for a very rich answer also. I think your answer is very thoughtful, and thanks for letting us know, because I also feel that if we had use cases embedded in the profile, the system could be more enabling. But I know the constraints of doing these things in short possible time and all that, the scope, width and the breadth there. And so I would now like to spend time on not just summarizing what's happened, but talking about where are we going from there, because that's the interest. In a lot of teams are asking us, where is this going? Are we going to do this in more countries? How are we going to do it? So clearly we will convene a kind of a workshop on the tool itself, on how we refine it going forward. The difference being that this time we will get all the countries which we are investing in. So it will be the actual investing TTLs who will become part of this design. Because I don't think if they get involved in that, they will then lead the policy dialogue and others. We cannot do this outside and then hope that this will happen. So I think we will try to organize after the break a kind of a thematic workshop on the tool and see whether we can refine it based on, because we have been also learning a lot in the last 2 years from what countries have done. We are not on ground zero. Sometimes you get a feel from these that we are at ground zero. We're not at ground zero. There's a lot what has happened. So learning from operations of what we have invested in also has to become part of the profile. So we learn more systematically from what we are doing. And I think if we can bring these two together, I think it becomes a way of a policy dialogue, maybe a strategy development for Ministry of Agriculture, and then probably also more kind of an ecosystem building kind of work, which Vinay was talking about. We increasingly are getting requests from government to advise them on how we build the ecosystem. And we are doing this with IFC, our private sector arm, on how we will develop the upstream work with IFC to build the ecosystem there. So I think we want to take the good lessons from what you did, plus bring in other lessons and see if we can come with a refined methodology. We also have tools which are being developed by Gates and Boston Consulting Group, which are more looking at innovations and solutions and all. And from that, they're also coming with investment priorities also. So it's like, this is a good tool to identify the policy options, and that's the tool to find more investment options. And we're going to see if we can bring these two tools together. So in September, we'll have a presentation by Boston Consulting Group and Gates, basically on the tool. And then I think we will have a small subgroup of community of practice. I think Katrina is a very important part of that, in which we look at where are we taking this. And then we would like James and Veske, all of you, to be part of that advisory group also, so that you are really helping us build the next generation as well. I would also acknowledge that Rachel is here. She's the American University Beirut, who has co-led the Mashreq digitization report. And we are really looking at developing this in Mashreq region. And we would like to develop more regional partners when we do this the next time. And she has very rich set of ideas, and really appreciate Rachel being here and also feeding us with ideas. Good to see Farbod bringing the EBA experience there. I want to see how we can bring other tools and integrate with this tool so that we see the complementarities there. And Johannes also, I think very good. The field people are there, and I think we're getting very good ideas from them. And then John, Katie, and others who are regular on our webinar are always feeding us with ideas. I want to acknowledge them, because we don't take questions by name. But I would like to say that what comments you have provided are very rich, and we would like to build on that. So I think with that, this is our last webinar before we are breaking up because 30th June our financial year ended. So many thanks for your work and many thanks for making this series very successful. And it's your active participation which makes it successful. I would like to thank Katrina, James, Vitske, Froke, Vinay, and Tomas for their excellent contributions today. And look forward to engaging with you again. This series will be on break in July and August. This will come back in September when we have a long list already of 14 webinars in the pipeline. So we will announce that sometimes very soon. And we look forward to working with all of you. Thank you very much and take care. And have good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Parmesh. Bye.
Very much. Thank you, Katrina. Bye-bye.
Bye.